Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today at the British Royal Armouries taking a look at some interesting experimental machine guns in their extensive reference collection. This is actually a Finnish L41 Sampo. This is a gun of which 7 survive today, 6 in Finland, and this one here at the British Royal Armouries. I actually got it in trade from the Finnish Sotimuseo. At any rate, this is an experimental belt-fed light machine gun, belt-fed general purpose machine gun, a gun intended to replace the Maxim gun in Finnish service. So the backstory, of course, is the Maxim is a famously durable and reliable gun, but it's also famously heavy and awkward to move around. It's fantastic in an emplaced defensive position, as it was used largely in World War I, for example, but it's not that great for troops on the assault, on the attack. And the Finns were looking for something that would perhaps have the good effects of the Maxim, but be a little bit handier, a little bit lighter, easier to move around. Now, initially, they start by looking at ways to perhaps increase the magazine capacity of the LS-26 light machine gun, and there are some examples, some experiments with 75-round drums for those guns. That's the LS-26/31 and 32, but that doesn't really go anywhere in Finnish service, and about the time that those experiments are taking place, the Finnish military high command finally relents and allows designers like Aimo Lahti to use gas operation in some of their guns. Lahti had been in favor of using gas operation when he developed the LS-26, but he was forced by basically military requirements to use a recoil-operated gun. The Maxim was recoil-operated. That was the gun that was well known. Therefore, recoil operation was best, and our new gun needs to be recoil-operated. This is one of many instances in firearms design and trials history where there are dumb requirements set up by higher-ups in the administrative services who don't really know what they're talking about. For a good example of this, you can see the entire German Gewehr 41 trials series. Anyway, in the early 30s, finally, gas operation becomes acceptable. And so Lahti switches gears and starts developing a new gun, and that will be the L34 Sampo, which I actually have a video on that I filmed at Sacco a couple of years ago. That gun is very much like a Bren gun or a ZB-26, ZB-30, and it's box magazine fed. That goes through some experiments, but there's also an idea of making sort of the heavy version of that action using a belt feed. Now, it appears that this design was pretty much in place about 1938, but it wasn't a priority. There wasn't a lot of motivation behind it until the Winter War starts, and that really kickstarts interest in maybe some of these new firearms designs would be really useful to have in service. So it gets prioritized in 1940. And within about a year, the design is actually ready for production. The spring of '41, they order 50 of these guns from VKT. That's the state rifle factory in Finland. It will take about another year until the production guns are ready to go. The initial trial, they have a few problems. There's some heat treating issues, some spring issues. They get those resolved, and by the fall, September of 1942, they pass a final inspection. There are a total of 33 guns that have been manufactured, and 28 of those are sent out for troop trials, 5 of them retained by the factory and the administration. So we'll talk about what happens to this gun in a moment, but first, let me take this one apart, because this is really neat on the inside. This is like a Bren gun and a Maxim gun had a child, and it's the L41 Sampo. I'll give you a quick view of the markings here. This is serial number 1023. They started at 1000 or 1001. VKT, State Rifle Factory, and then KKL41 is the official designation of the gun. That's Konekivari, or machine gun, Lahti, 1941 pattern. All right, I'm not entirely sure where to go next on this gun to begin with for you guys. This thing is an absolute tank of a gun. It weighs 32 pounds, which is probably about 10 pounds more than it really has to, but these parts are just massive and bulky. So we have our charging handle here. It is non-reciprocating. I'll pull it back and then snap it forward. Your belt feed is here, obviously. We have a folding bipod that will rotate. It'll actually rotate 360 around the gas tube, although as long as the barrel's there, that'll stop it. Open that up and you have a locking bar. You can see here there is kind of a simple one-pin lock there on the bipod. So a little bit of pivot, rotation this way, it then folds down like that. We have an adjustable gas block here, so that's 3. That is marked 2.5. If I press this pin in, I can rotate it up to the alternate position. And then we also have a 3.5 on the other side. Now, according to the reference material that I found, changing between these settings when the gun is clean will adjust your rate of fire from 600 up to 1,000 rounds per minute. It would also, of course, be useful when the gun gets really dirty. If it starts to run too sluggish, you open up the gas port. I do want to take a moment here to point out the Finnish backpack style sling straps. So you got 2 straps, throw the whole thing over your back. And we have a spring-loaded carry handle right there. I'm going to start with disassembly here because this gun is really quite bulky. So push this latch down, grab the handle, and rotate it up 90 degrees, and you can pull the barrel out. We have barrel locking lugs, very much like a ZB or Bren system. The handle here is much too far forward to function as a grip on the gun. This handle is specifically for being able to manipulate overheated barrels when you're changing them. Notice that we have tripod mounting points here and here. You could set this up for use as an emplaced heavy machine gun, and if you were going to do that, you could actually take the buttstock off without any problem. So there's a latch here, push that down, and you can just slide the buttstock right off the back of the gun. There was actually an early version of this design that didn't have the buttstock or pistol grip at all and used a set of spade grips on the back, but they fairly quickly realized that they wanted the mobility and flexibility of having the pistol grip. All right, now that we're getting a little bit lighter here with some bits removed, I'll point out we have a safety right there. That is the fire position. VARM is the safe position. You can see the rear sight is essentially copied off of the M39 rifles. We have this locking piece back here with a number of detents in it. I don't know exactly what that's for, but I suspect that it was intended to be an optics mount. The idea being you open this up, slide your optic in, and then you would, this is probably slightly eccentric, and you click it down to whatever is tight. Now, the standard Finnish optic that in theory would have gone on here would be the PH, the Fisica. This is a really pretty crap optic, but it was intended to be used on the Maxims, and this would have been an appropriate place for it. However, as you can see, the standard mount, while it will fit a Maxim gun, does not, doesn't have an interface for that. So also made to fit one of the M27 or M39 rifles. All right, to continue disassembly, we're going to go to this cross pin. When I pull this out, it will release the back plug of the gun and the main spring back there, which is under substantial pressure. There we go. So that comes out. This is a very heavy block with, I believe, a pair of spring-loaded buffers in it. We can then slide off the firing grip assembly. Again, a very simple piece here. No semi-auto, just full auto. You pull down, sear drops, gun fires. Next up, the recoil spring comes out. That is happily captive. And now we can pull out the bolt and carrier assembly. All right, that comes out. How's that for a weird hybrid? This is like a Maxim lock feed system on a Bren gun. Bolt and carrier, and the locking block just fell out. That is fantastically cool. We'll go over this in just a minute. But while we're still here, we have this sliding dust cover over the bottom of the receiver. I can pull that out. This thing is just a chonky monster. Like you could probably beat someone to death with that thing. Like so many of the parts of this gun are massively overbuilt, which is why it weighs 10 pounds more than it really needs to. In theory, if you gave this thing 5 or 10 years of development, you could end up with something actually really interestingly svelte, sort of a belt-fed Bren Western equivalent to a PK, perhaps, sort of gun. Anyway, we have one item left here, and that is the feed block. We have these two spring-loaded catches, and if I pop those down, I can slide the whole feed block out of the receiver. All right, so that leaves us with this now empty receiver, giant block of metal. That right up there, that guy right there, is our locking shoulder. It is interchangeable. It is differently hardened than the rest of the components. That's very typical. That's a spring-loaded ejector right there. That's housed right here and also changeable. And that's pretty much it. Now, you'll notice there are a couple of curving tracks right in here. Let's take a look at how those work. All right, these are the four pieces of our bolt and carrier assembly, not counting this sliding guy that I'm not going to remove. This is the firing pin, and very much like a Bren or ZB style of gun, that firing pin is actually controlled by the bolt carrier. So this fires from an open bolt. When the bolt carrier is fully forward, the firing pin engages, hits primer, fires the gun. This is our locking block. It is going to sit right here, and it's going to rise up and pull down based on that hook and these angled surfaces. And then this is our actual bolt that has 3 extractors in it, which is curious. This is actually right side up. This to me is the most fascinating part of the gun because it's basically like Lahti took the Maxim lock, the Maxim feed system that he was familiar with, and just adapted it to a Bren gun style of bolt. So when this is in the gun, your barrel is in line with this right here. That's the firing pin hole, obviously. And then the belt is in line with this section. So the bolt here goes forward. This bottom extractor clips onto a round in the belt, while there's a loaded round in the chamber. When you fire, you have 2 cases that are both getting extracted out. The bottom one's coming backwards out of the belt, the top one's coming backwards out of the chamber. As this moves backward, the empty case is going to hit the ejector and get kicked out, while the bottom case, this pin, is being controlled by one of those curving tracks inside the receiver. That bottom case, as this is moving back, is going to get pushed upward until it's all the way up in the firing position. That's when the bolt's all the way back. The bolt is then going to move forward. It's going to chamber that round, and that curving track is going to lower this piece down so that once it goes fully into battery, this snaps over the next round in the belt. By the way, it is worth pointing out, we also have a curving track here on the op rod. That is going to be interfaced with this peg on the bottom of the feed shuttle. So this feed block is sitting here, and as the op rod goes back and forth, it's running this peg side to side in that track. So that's what's going to pull a cartridge in to the position so that the bolt here can grab it and pull it out of the belt. And of course, while I'm here, we also have this catch at the top, which lifts the top retaining pawl, allows you to unload the gun. All right, just so you can see, here's the whole bolt assembly, well, assembled. The whole thing is going to go forward. When it's closed, the bolt face is going to hit the chamber and stop, and the bolt carrier, the op rod down here, will continue moving. As it goes forward, you can see it lifts up this locking block. That's going to lock the action, and then the firing pin will protrude right there. When gas pressure from firing hits the piston here, that's going to push the op rod backwards, which is going to retract the firing pin first, like that. Then it is going to pull the locking block down, and then the whole assembly will move backwards, extracting the now fired empty case and extracting a loaded round from the belt on the bottom there. Now, if I can show you this action in the gun, you can see that our, call it feed extractor, the belt feed extractor, is sitting right there. This is the hole where the belt feed system would sit. And as we, there we go, we're going to start to pull back here, and you can see that bottom extractor right there. It starts to pull up, so it's going to push, well, there's the ejector. So once the bolt gets to this point, the empty case has been kicked out, that big open ejection port on the side. The new round is being pushed up. It is fully upward when the bolt is fully back. Then we're going to start cycling forward. Right about there, this extractor is going to start sliding back down. The round in that top piece of the bolt face goes into the chamber. The bottom extractor drops all the way down. And right here, once the bolt's fully forward, it's in position to pick up the next round from the belt. All right, there you go. There is the whole L41 Sampo field stripped. It was a little tricky to get all of those rather long pieces in one camera frame, but I think that has pretty well done it. We'll point out actually also there used to be a folding shoulder rest here on the buttstock, and that has snapped off at some point, perhaps a weak point on the gun. Also, we have inherited the Soviet thing of putting an oiler bottle in the stock. Presto, there you go. All right, let's pick up our story in September of '42. The Winter War, of course, is long since over. We're currently now in the continuation war. Finland has retaken its territory in Karelia and moved further into Russian space. They've set up a defensive line. They reject German requests for them to help with the siege of Leningrad. At any rate, 28 of these are sent out to a variety of different units for trials. And they're not sent to all one unit. They're sent to a variety of people. You know, try this out. Tell us what you think. And the results were a bit mixed. In general, the gun was well liked. It was seen as better in the attack than in the defensive role, which kind of makes sense. It's going to be hard. Any machine gun is going to be hard pressed to match the Maxim in defensive emplacement firepower. But it's also not that hard to be better than a Maxim if you're going to be picking the thing up by yourself and making sort of a crouching assault run on an enemy trench line. And this did okay at that. There were some problems noted, like once the barrels got a little bit dirty, barrel changing got difficult. But overall, and some small tweaks that could be made, as you would expect from the first production run of basically 24 guns. But overall, they were kind of seen in a pretty good light. Now, 1943, early 43 rolls around, and these guns are still out in the field being used actively. But the Finnish arms, the arms section of the Finnish High Command gets distracted because all of a sudden they're working more closely with Germany. Germany's introducing the MG42 at this point. That's very interesting because that's a very good gun and it's a fairly cheap gun to make, certainly compared to either a Maxim or something like this that requires a ton of machining time. And the Finns they get this idea of what if we could do an MG42 in 7.62 by 54 rimmed? Like we use our ammo and our belts, but we can make MG42s. And Germany's willing to supply us with receivers. So like we could make all the other parts, get in the receivers with that stamped assembled receiver unit that is something that VKT and Sako really didn't have the tooling and the expertise to make, but if we can bring them in from Germany, that'll be a great solution. They did actually make at least one experimental, reasonably successful MG42 in 54 rimmed, and it's kind of like they don't have enough focus to pay attention to both projects at the same time. So while they get distracted looking at MG42 possibilities, the Sampo kind of gets forgotten about, and the guns are still in service. And there's one incident where one of them appears to have been captured during a Russian raid. And it's not clear if the gun was ever recovered or not, but there may be one of these somewhere deep in a Russian storage depot or archive somewhere. But other than that, the guns actually continued to serve fairly effectively throughout the entire remainder of the continuation war. Now, as for the MG42 idea, well, as the war progresses worse and worse for Germany, the possibility of actually getting 42 receivers from Germany for this project falls to like zero. The Germans are going to keep all of the receivers they can make for themselves because they need them. And so both projects fizzle kind of into nothing, but at least one of these guns is literally used until the very end of the continuation war. So pretty cool that they stayed in service. Now, after the war, this sort of thing is the project is dropped. The Finns are going to move to other guns. They eventually adopt the KKVK 62 in the 1960s. These are deemed obsolete in 1947, and all but 7 of them are destroyed. So, I mean, there were only 33 to begin with, so they destroy, what would that be, 24 of them? 26 of them? Sorry, 26 of them. 7 remain. One of those is traded in, I believe, the 1980s to the National Firearms Center, part of the British Royal Armouries, and that would be this example. And the remainder, the other 6, are in Finland, with possibly that one somewhere in Russia, but that's unclear. So, a very cool opportunity. A big thanks to the British Royal Armouries for giving me access to this one. This was an extremely cool gun to get a look at inside. It's not often that you find something really uniquely different like the Sampo is here. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video as well. Thanks for watching.